Hey everybody, it's Andrew here and welcome back to my channel. So we've got some updates that could affect Social Security benefits and the potential of getting more stimulus approved. We also have some updates from Joe Manchin as rumors are circulating that he might be open to doing a smaller stimulus package. So let's discuss the details, but before we jump into it, as always, please like this video, subscribe, and share this channel with anyone who you think might find this helpful. This is a community for seniors, and my job here is to be a voice for you and be a voice for seniors to make sure President Biden keeps his promises to increase Social Security, SSI, and SSDI as well. Of course, we're still hoping for that stimulus check as well. Now, we have an update from Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema as well, but first, I want to quickly go over a big reason why we actually might get another stimulus check. Now, obviously, inflation continues to be a problem, and rent prices have been soaring as well. Now, in 2021, the average rent across the country went up by a whopping 14%. In some major cities, like popular cities like Austin, Texas, it went up as much as 40%. And this is expected to get even worse this year in 2022. And experts are expecting a 10% increase in rents nationwide in 2022. So a lot of experts are saying that really this is another reason why we might actually end up needing more stimulus. If you look back in 2020, the reason we needed the stimulus is because we dropped into a recession and people needed money to keep up with their expenses. Now, although we're not currently in a recession now, with interest rates going up, some people think that they're going to have to raise interest rates so high that they're actually going to push us back into a recession once again. And we might be in a worse position because now rents are higher, inflation is higher across the board, and then a recession could hit, leaving people with less money than even before, which again means that the potential for another stimulus check could end up being back on the board. So I'm going to play this quick clip talking about rent prices, the fact that they've been going up so much, and that they're anticipating them going up even more this year. So let's take a look, see what they had to say. Then we'll talk about what we expect to happen next and a quick update on Joe Manchin as well.
In rent prices, I was just talking about this with some of my friends. Prices in New York City have skyrocketed. Americans across the country are struggling as the prices soar.
Average monthly rents increased by 14% across the U.S. in 2021, and the cost has risen even higher, up to 40% in some popular cities like Austin, Texas.
To make matters worse, economists say rents have more room to grow. Consumer experts expect them to rise by 10% in the year ahead. These higher prices could be a key driver of inflation this year, posing yet another challenge to the Biden administration.
Joining us now is CBS News Money Watch reporter Megan Cirillo. Megan, great to see you again. So can you break down some of the price hikes in these individual cities and why some cities are seeing much higher rises than others?
Sure. So on average, across the 50 biggest metro areas in the U.S., rents rose by about 14%. But like you said, in Austin, Texas, in these coveted markets, they were up by 40%. In New York City and surrounding areas like Newark, New Jersey, New Brunswick, New Jersey, Nassau County, New York, they were up 35%, as well as by up 35% in Florida, in West Palm Beach and Jacksonville and Miami. And as always, it's an issue of supply and demand. A lot of would-be homeowners are finding that the cost of homeownership is unaffordable to them right now. Mortgage payments are too high, so they're being pushed or forced into staying in the rental market. And there's just not a lot of inventory. Vacancy rates are low, and that's putting pressure on the cost of rent. Normally, we only see single-digit increases. In 2020, rents across the U.S. rose by 3%. So this 14% figure is really striking.
Megan, I was just mentioning my friends and I have been talking about the price hikes here in New York City. When the pandemic hit, and the building that my family and I were living in at the time actually offered 3 months of free rent. Fast forward, what caused this rise in prices?
Right. So 2020 was a completely different story altogether. a lot of young people who were living in New York because of the opportunities to work and socialize left because they weren't working, their offices were closed, and they couldn't go out and see their friends. So households bundled together. They moved home, or moved in with relatives, and so they vacated those units, and rents were dropped briefly. But what we've seen since then, what we saw last year was sort of the reverse. We saw households unbundle. We even saw some divorces. So there were more people seeking homes, seeking a limited number of units available. And what we also saw was with the rise of remote work, people said, okay, well, I can work from anywhere. Why don't I go down to Florida? So they may have had, so they're now putting pressure on these other markets, forcing some locals to reconsider, if they can afford the cost of living.
Gosh, too much closeness during the pandemic reminded people why they don't want to live at home anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So, of course, there were these national eviction moratoriums during the pandemic, and in some areas, even rental assistance, right? So people may have gotten into a position where they thought they were okay, right? That they could afford their rent and that they were feeling pretty comfortable. But a lot of those have ended now, Megan. So what should people do if they want to try and stay in their homes, but they're seeing these rent hikes that they can't afford? Are there resources available?
Unfortunately, a lot of Americans find themselves between a rock and a hard place. They're saying they can't afford to buy, but they can't afford to rent either. In the meantime, there are some unused funds from the Biden administration's emergency rental assistance program that will be reallocated. The Biden administration has also said that it plans to make 100,000 units of affordable housing available in the next 3 years. And while economists expect rents to continue to rise, at some point they'll level out because landlords can only charge what people can afford to pay. So they won't rise forever. But until then, a lot of folks are going to have to, unfortunately, if they can no longer afford rent, they may have to move to a different city or a different part of the country altogether, where the costs of living are more manageable given their budgets.
Let me know in the comments, folks. Has your rent gone up? I know a lot of people have been locked into a lease, so really, a lot of people's rents haven't gone up yet. But people are nervous that when their lease ends, usually in the summertime or late springtime, that their rents are going to go up as well. So let me know in the comments, guys. Is this something you're worried about with the rent going up? I think really it's more important than ever that seniors get an increase in Social Security. People on SSI and SSDI get a raise as well. Of course, these are things that President Biden promised, and a lot of experts are saying that these are things that Biden should focus on before these midterm elections. If they give these increases that were promised, this could also help Democrats win those elections in November. But it was pretty interesting to see how even in 2020, rents went up by 3%. And I remember in 2020, living in Chicago, like people were moving out of the city, going to the suburbs, and most buildings were giving like a free month of rent, even 2 to 3 free months of rent, and free parking, which is usually a huge premium here in Chicago. So to see that nationwide, it still went up. Even though it was only 3%, the fact that rent went up even in 2020, I mean, if ever there was going to be a year where rent went down, I thought it would have been 2020. And then seeing it go up 14% in 2021 really almost just feels like they were making up for lost ground. And it's crazy. Like things are going to get worse. And really, I mean, Biden has to find a way to deal with inflation and deal with these increased costs that people are going through. And a lot of people are saying that not only doing Social Security, SSI, and SSDI, but also doing that stimulus check could help the American people as well as help Democrats win those elections in November. Now, Republicans would say that the stimulus checks caused inflation, but really it's pretty obvious to see that inflation is being caused by two things. One, supply chain issues, because inflation is simply a supply and demand issue, right? Demand is high because the economy reopened, and supply is low because we're having supply chain issues. And secondly, we're also having an increase in wages. Now, one of the biggest ways that they control inflation is unfortunately by controlling wages, right? So we've seen the last 20, 30 years, wages have stagnated, and that's also helped control inflation, which is bad for people because wages aren't going up, but then it also keeps inflation down. So now with wages going up, that's kind of causing inflation to some extent because people have more money and they're willing to pay more for products and services. So it's kind of frustrating that when wages go up, it also causes inflation. If it wasn't for the supply chain issues, we might have been in a situation where wages go up and inflation was still controlled. But when you combine wages going up and supply chain issues, we've got a disaster here, folks. And Really, a lot of experts are saying that Democrats should put the stimulus checks in this next package, help the American people, and then also win those re-elections in November. It's worked before. It worked in Georgia. It's worked in California with Governor Newsom. So this is something we're monitoring, folks. Will Democrats take this new data of rents going up potentially another 10%, inflation getting worse, the American people struggling, the promises of increasing benefits, increasing Social Security, SSI, and SSDI? Will they take all this information and actually approve another round of stimulus checks? I know it feels a little far-fetched, especially with Joe Manchin recently saying that the Build Back Better Act is dead. But then I guess just earlier this week, he gave a fresh hint as to a smaller package that he might be up for. So let's take a look. Joe Manchin gave a fresh hint on what he wants from a smaller, skinny Build Back Better stimulus package. Just fix the tax code. So it looks like Joe Manchin said he wants to roll back the 2017 tax cuts that President Trump put in place. This helped the middle class somewhat, but most of those tax cuts went to millionaires and billionaires. The problem here is that Senator Kyrsten Sinema doesn't want to raise taxes, right? So we've got this weird problem where these two seem to usually be aligned, but then when it comes to taxes, Joe Manchin actually wants to be more aggressive in raising taxes, and Kyrsten Sinema doesn't. So now what we're monitoring here is, will Joe Biden offer Joe Manchin a deal that also works for Kyrsten Sinema with raising taxes and at the same time including some kind of financial assistance for the American people, whether that's a stimulus check, increasing benefits, things like more rental assistance, things like that, that would really help people as rents and inflation continue to skyrocket. So this is what we're currently monitoring. Can President Biden revive this deal? Obviously, it's going to be a smaller package, but it could still include some funding for people, especially for rental assistance. And I just want to point out, too, that there's still rental assistance money left over from the last package. So if you guys need rental assistance, just go on Google and search your county, whatever county that is, and then type in rental assistance. And usually you're going to find something that's going to show you how to apply. Just make sure it's an official .gov website. There's a lot of scams out there. People know that people want stimulus and rental assistance. So a lot of those websites are scams. They take your information and they try and steal your money or your identity. So if you do that, just please make sure it's a .gov website. And rents going up not only is bad for rents directly, but it's also going to make the inflation numbers really bad because rent accounts for 30% of the inflation formula, right? So this is going to look even worse for Democrats in the polls because rents are going up so much this year. That means even if other parts of inflation go down, like gas, energy, cars, things like that, the fact that rent is 30% of the formula means that we're probably going to have high inflation for the rest of the year, folks. So earlier in the year, they said it would end in the middle of the year. Now they're saying probably at the end of 2022. So obviously things continue to get worse. And the worse things get, the more the American people need help. And honestly, the more the chances are that we will get some kind of financial assistance, whether it's stimulus or an increase in Social Security, SSI, and SSDI. So that's about it for this video, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Again, I'll keep you posted as things develop when it comes to Social Security, what's happening with SSI, SSDI, politics, and the economy at large. Again, right now we're just keeping an eye on things between Joe Manchin and Joe Biden and seeing if they can strike a deal to increase taxes and include some sort of help for the American people. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.